Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Leach again, and today we are going to finish up Lamb to the Slaughter. So let's find out what happens. Our objectives today are the same as they've been. We're going to be thinking about what we're doing as far as note taking and annotation, and we're going to be talking about making inferences and making sure that those inferences are supported by text evidence. And then I promise it's coming, y'all. You're going to have to talk on Flipgrid about elements of a story. Okay, so before we get started, you're going to need your copy of Lamb to the Slaughter and a copy of Finding Evidence as I Read Literature for that third part of the story, and it's in the Google Classroom. And then a highlighter and a pen or pencil if you're working on paper. So let's just really quickly review suspense because it's going to be super important today. Remember that suspense is that feeling of anxiety or anticipation as readers wait for the outcome of an event. So it's like you can't wait to find out what happens. Oh my gosh. And the problem keeps getting worse and worse. You get tense because you're not sure what's going to happen. So we're going to be looking a little bit at suspense today. And just to kind of recap, we had said that the first time we read, we were looking really more at exposition. And last time we read, we were spending most of our time in rising action. We did find out what the main conflict is, so that ended the exposition, and we're kind of going into the rising action. And so we left off in rising action. And I mean, I don't want to ruin it for you, but we're going to read the rest of the story today. So we are going to figure out what the climax, falling action, and resolution are. And so to build that suspense, we have some questions. We know that Mary is lying to the police. They're searching her house. We don't know. Are the police going to see through her act? Is the grocery guy going to mess up her alibi? Are the police going to figure out that the lamb was the murder weapon? And will the stress be too much and cause her to confess? So there's lots and lots of questions right now, and we just don't know which way it's going to go. And so all of those unsolved kind of mystery questions make it so that the suspense gets more and more exciting. So let's see what happens. We are going to read 48 to 53. Now, you should have actually already read it because your activity from yesterday was to read the rest of the story and to figure out what you would choose to jot about for each section. And so what I'm going to say is that if you chose something different to jot about, that's okay. Readers will choose to jot about something different. I'm picked suspense because the part of the story where we are, it just makes sense that, the tension is building and building. And so that's why I picked suspense for this. But if you pick something else like character, there are things about the characters in this little section. So here we go. Patrick's dead. Who's speaking? Mrs. Maloney, Mrs. Patrick Maloney. You mean Patrick Maloney's dead? I think so, she sobbed. He's lying on the floor, and I think he's dead. Be right over, the man said. The car came very quickly, and when she opened the front door, two policemen walked in. She knew them both. She knew nearly all the men at that precinct, and she fell right into Jack Noonan's arms, weeping hysterically. He put her gently into a chair, then went over to join the other one, who was called O'Malley, kneeling by the body. Is he dead? She cried. I'm afraid he is. What happened? Briefly, she told her story about going out to the grocer and coming back to find him on the floor. While she was talking, crying and talking, Noonan discovered a small patch of congealed blood on the dead man's head. He showed it to O'Malley, who got up at once and hurried to the phone. Soon, other men began to come into the house. First a doctor, then two detectives, one of whom she knew by name. Later, a police photographer arrived and took pictures, and a man who knew about fingerprints. There was a great deal of whispering and muttering beside the corpse, and the detectives kept asking her a lot of questions, but they always treated her kindly. She told her story again, this time from the beginning, when Patrick had come in and she was sewing and he was tired, so tired he hadn't wanted to go out for supper. She told how she'd put the meat in the oven. It's there now, cooking, and how she'd slipped out to the grocer for vegetables and come back to find him lying on the floor. Which grocer? One of the detectives asked. She told him, and he turned and whispered something to the other detective, who immediately went outside into the street. Okay, so for this section, I did jot a little bit about character because there was some stuff about character and then suspense. So for suspense, They're looking at the clues, asking her questions, and they are checking her story. So I thought that was really interesting. The inference I could make is that the police might suspect her of the murder, or at least they're not ruling her out. Because when she said, well, this happened and this happened, and then I went to the grocery store, they asked who the grocery was, and then one of the detectives left. And I'm inferencing that he's going to check with the grocer to see if it's true. And so that means they might actually suspect her. However, when I think about the characters of the police, they put her gently into a chair and they're treating her kindly. So, one thing I can infer about the police is that they like her and they feel bad for her. And that makes sense because her husband was a police officer. She knows some of them personally. And so, when you know someone pretty well, you don't really expect them to do something really terrible. So they probably they are checking her story and that does build up the suspense because they might find something that makes her look guilty. But overall, they're being super nice to her. Nicer than they would if it was a stranger suspected of a murder. Okay, our next little chunk is 54 to 56. Again, I'm going to be looking for information about characters and I'm going to be looking for things that make the tension worse or build suspense. So 54. In 15 minutes, he was back with a page of notes, and there was more whispering, and through her sobbing, she heard a few of the whispered phrases. Acted quite normal, very cheerful, wanted to give him a good supper, peas, cheesecake, impossible that she. After a while, the photographer and the doctor departed, and two other men came in and took the corpse away on a stretcher. Then the fingerprint man went away. The two detectives remained, and so did the two policemen. They were exceptionally nice to her, and Jack Noonan asked if she wouldn't rather go somewhere else, to her sister's house perhaps, or to his own wife who would take care of her and put her up for the night. No, she said. She didn't feel she could move even a yard at the moment. Would they mind awfully if she just stayed where she was until she felt better? She didn't feel too good at the moment. She really didn't. Then hadn't she better lie down on the bed? Jack Noonan asked. No, she said. She'd like to stay right where she was in this chair. A little later, perhaps, when she felt better, she would move. Okay, so we're looking at character stuff and suspense. So again, the suspense, they did check her alibi, but the grocer said that she was totally normal, that he didn't think it was possible that she would have killed her husband. So that takes down the suspense a little bit. But for character, she's sticking around to watch them. She doesn't want to leave the scene of the crime because she has to kind of keep an eye on, are they going to find evidence that shows she's guilty? So she's got to keep an eye on it. And then they're still being super nice to her. One of the detectives offers to even have his own wife take care of her. And then the mood of the story right now is super tense. Like Mary obviously is very upset. Her husband's dead and she killed him. And she's worried she's going to get caught. And the detectives, their friend died and they're trying to figure out who did it. And they're worried about her because they didn't know she's the one who did it. So it's a super tense kind of atmosphere and feeling. The inference that I made just here from the way she acted is that she's nervous that she's going to get caught because she's so thinking that, she wants to stick around and watch them. Okay, 57 to 60. We're going to look at suspense and again, kind of keeping an eye on the mood or atmosphere of the story. So they left her there while they went about their business, searching the house. Occasionally, one of the detectives asked her another question. Sometimes Jack Noonan spoke to her gently as he passed by. Her husband, he told her, had been killed by a blow on the back of the head, administered with a heavy blunt instrument, almost certainly a large piece of metal. They were looking for the weapon. The murderer may have taken it with him, but on the other hand, he may have thrown it away or hidden it somewhere on the premises. It's the old story, he said. Get the weapon and you've got the man. Later, one of the detectives came up and sat beside her. Did she know, he asked, of anything in the house that could have been used as the weapon? Would she mind having a look around to see if anything was missing? A very big spanner, for example, or a heavy metal vase. They didn't have any heavy metal vases, she said. Or a big spanner? She didn't think they had a big spanner, but there might be something like that in the garage. Okay, so I just want to talk about vocabulary really quickly because I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't know what a spanner is. Okay, it mentions spanner, but I'm guessing it's some kind of metal tool because This cop up here said that they're looking for something really big and heavy made of metal. And then she doesn't think they have a spanner, but there might be some things like that in the garage. So I'm just using the context to make me think that a spanner is probably some kind of heavy metal tool, and that's what that word means. So, okay. So for 57 to 60, suspense wise, the police know what kind of weapon would have killed him. And so that builds the suspense because they're right that something heavy and kind of blunt did kill him. And so they're looking kind of, sort of, for the right thing. So that makes me think like they might actually be able to figure this out. And then they ask her about objects in the house that might fit the description. But I can infer she's still trying to get away with it because she kind of redirects the detective and steers him in the wrong direction. So when he starts asking about, this kind of thing or that kind of thing, she's like, why don't you check the garage? And she knows there's nothing in the garage. I mean, she knows nothing to do with the murder is in the garage. And then he asks, could she get up and look around with them? And she doesn't say no, but she doesn't do it. She just kind of sends them off in a different direction. So that was kind of interesting. And then the mood again is still kind of tense. Let's look at 61 to 65. So we're going to look for character stuff and suspense stuff. The search went on. She knew that there were other policemen in the garden all around the house. She could hear their footsteps on the gravel outside, and sometimes she saw the flash of a torch through a chink in the curtains. It began to get late, nearly 9, she noticed by the clock on the mantel. The 4 men searching the room seemed to be growing weary, a trifle exasperated. Jack, she said the next time Sergeant Noonan went by, would you mind giving me a drink? Sure, I'll give you a drink. You mean this whiskey? Yes, please, but just a small one. It might make me feel better. He handed her the glass. Why don't you have one yourself? She said. You must be awfully tired. Please do. You've been very good to me. Well, he answered, it's not strictly allowed, but I might take just a drop to keep me going. One by one, the others came in and were persuaded to take a little sip of whiskey. They stood around rather awkwardly with the drinks in their hands, uncomfortable in her presence, trying to say consoling things to her. Sergeant Noonan wandered into the kitchen, came out quickly, and said, Look, Mrs. Maloney, you know that oven of yours is still on, and the meat is still inside. Oh, dear me, she cried, so it is. I better turn it off for you, hadn't I? Will you do that, Jack? Thank you so much. When the sergeant returned the second time, she looked at him with her large, dark, tearful eyes. Jack Noonan, she said. Yes? Would you do me a small favor, you and these others? We can try, Mrs. Maloney. Well, she said, here you all are, and good friends of dear Patrick's too, and helping to catch the man who killed him. You must be terribly hungry by now because it's long past your supper time, and I know Patrick would never forgive me, God bless his soul, if I allowed you to remain in his house without offering you decent hospitality. Why don't you eat up that lamb that's in the oven? It'll be cooked just right by now. Wouldn't dream of it, Sergeant Noonan said. Okay. So, suspense wise, the police are searching, and she convinces the detective to have a drink, and the other police officers have a drink, and then she asks them to eat the lamb. And so, the suspense piece here is if they eat it, she's essentially going to get away with murder because one of the police officers said earlier if you find the weapon, then you can win the case in court. You find the weapon, you can get the murderer. And so, the weapon is the lamb. So, if they eat it, there's no evidence. And so she's being super, super smart right there. She offers them drinks, she offers them food, and they're trying to make her feel better. They're being really sweet. They feel bad because she's sad. They're kind of awkward around her. And so the suspense piece here is like super, super suspenseful because we're like, oh my gosh, are they going to eat it? Because if they don't, they could still get her. But if they do, it's all over. Let's find out what happens. Remember that exposition, that's the beginning of the story where we get the character setting and conflict. Rising action is where the suspense is. Climax is the point at which the reader knows how the conflict will be resolved. So, guys, we know that if they eat the lamb, then that means we know how the conflict's going to get resolved. If they don't, then we know how the conflict is going to be resolved. So, whenever that happens, the part where they either eat the lamb or don't, that's going to be the climax because it's going to tell us how it all is going to play out. So, oh my gosh, here we go. So exciting. Okay, 66 to 70 characters. How, Mary, the problem, how's it going to get resolved? Suspense. What's the ending? What's the mood? Oh my gosh, here we go. All the things. Please, she begged, please eat it. Personally, I couldn't touch a thing. Certainly not what's been in the house when he was here. But it's all right for you. It would be a favor to me if you'd eat it up. Then you can go on with your work again afterwards. There was a good deal of hesitating among the 4 policemen, but they were clearly hungry, and in the end they were persuaded to go into the kitchen and help themselves. The woman stayed where she was, listening to them through the open door, and she could hear them speaking among themselves, their voices thick and sloppy because their mouths were full of meat. Have some more, Charlie? No, better not finish it. She wants us to finish it. She said so. It'd be doing her a favor. Okay then, give me some more. That's the hell of the big club the guy must have used to hit poor Patrick, one of them was saying. The doc says his skull was smashed all to pieces, just like from a sledgehammer. That's why it ought to be easy to find. Exactly what I say. Whoever done it, they're not going to be carrying a thing like that around with them longer than they need. One of them belched. Personally, I think it's right here on the premises. Probably right under our very noses. What do you think, Jack? And in the other room, Mary Maloney began to giggle. Okay, holy cow, they eat the lamb. They eat it while they talk about the murder weapon, and one of them burps and she laughs. And the inference I can make there is that she's going to get away with it because they ate the murder weapon. And so the mood in that section, the atmosphere in that section is a lot lighter. It's a little funny because we know that they're eating the murder weapon, but they don't know. And then they're burping and sort of talking and saying things, and she's giggling. She's finally not like sobbing and totally upset. She knows she's going to get away with that murder. So it's just wow. Just wow. So we've established meaning. We know what happens in the story, and we have identified the plot elements. So the next step, ladies and gents, we are going to analyze. And I spelled analyze wrong, but I'll fix it and it'll be okay. So see, teachers make mistakes too, and it's okay. And there we go. So I fixed my spelling mistake, and next time we talk about Lamb to the Slaughter, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the story, do some character analysis. We're going to talk about how the setting impacts the character, how the character choices impact the plot, and it's going to be super fun. Thanks for coming along, and I can't wait to analyze with you next.